CD3. Unit 9, Fashion and Status. Page 65. Listening for main ideas. A. Close your book. Listen to the lecture and take notes.
Today, everyone, as part of our look at fashion and design, we're going to take a look at fashion and social status. That is, how we use fashion to make statements about our social status, who we are, how wealthy we are, and so on. We do this with the kinds of cars we buy, the style of our houses, and of course, the clothes we wear, which is the subject of today's discussion. Now, the idea of using special clothes to signify social status has a long history dating back to ancient Egypt. In very hierarchical societies like ancient Egypt, for example, only those in high positions could wear sandals. Also, the Greeks and Romans had laws which controlled the type, the color, and number of garments that could be worn, as well as the kind of embroidery used. These were known as sumptuary laws. That's sumptuary, sumptuary laws. However, as barriers between social classes became weaker, these so-called sumptuary laws became increasingly difficult to enforce and were eventually abandoned. Instead, high status was indicated by the cost of a person's clothing. You know, rich and exotic materials, expensive and often unnecessary accessories, and difficult to care for styles. This kind of expensive and often unnecessary clothing was designed to attract attention. It was an example of what's called conspicuous consumption. That's conspicuous consumption. And of course, people thought the type of clothes you wore reflected what you could afford. In other words, your clothes reflected your wealth. I'm going to be using this word conspicuous a lot today. Conspicuous basically means deliberately attracting attention. If you look at fashion today, things haven't really changed much, have they? Even though people these days don't dress in silver or gold lace, clothes are still very much a sign of status. In fact, you could say that nowadays, many people believe clothes tell us about the personality, the honesty, talent, and intelligence of the person wearing them. In some social circles, there's often a feeling that someone who's not well-dressed is probably dishonest or stupid and without talent. Now that's sad, but true, I'm afraid. Many of us make these judgments very quickly and unconsciously, which, of course, is why people read and write books with titles like Dress for Success. The idea is, if you dress well, people will judge you positively even before you open your mouth, right? I'd say that people have very definite ideas about dress and character. But today I'm going to look in detail at this idea of conspicuous consumption. So just to recap, let me repeat that conspicuous consumption is about the different ways we spend money in order to show people our wealth. And one of the most obvious ways we do this is by wearing more clothes than other people. This is sometimes called conspicuous addition. Whatever the occasion, the well-to-do normally wear more clothes. In North America, for instance, men are more likely to wear jackets and vests, and women pantyhose, scarves, and unnecessary but expensive wraps, even in midsummer. And on the beach, even though their swimsuits may be like everyone else's, just watch the wealthy put on their silk beach kimonos when they come out of the water, or maybe a shirt, hat, and bag that matches their swimsuit, and people notice, right? Of course, they're supposed to notice. That's the point. Of course, people also show off their status by wearing a lot of clothes consecutively, rather than simultaneously. In other words, as we've seen, people wear more clothes, but they also like to show off, to display as many different outfits as possible. Basically, the more outfits you wear, the higher your status. It's as simple as that. Now, how do people do this? Well, they divide daily life into different sorts of activity, what's been called conspicuous division. And each of these activities, such as going to work or going out to dinner, requires a different kind of clothing. Now, this isn't anything new. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, it was common for the wealthier classes to have different clothing for different parts of the day. Men would wear a morning suit, a dress coat, a dinner jacket, and women, morning clothes, walking clothes, tea gowns, motoring outfits, evening dresses, you name it, there was a costume for it. Now, today, we have the same tradition, but the emphasis is on sports rather than social life. Fashionable people have different outfits for different sports, whether it's jogging or hiking, or cycling, golf, or aerobics, and to wear the wrong outfit can cause a loss of prestige. This, by the way, is what enables manufacturers of sports equipment to make so much money. And it's not just having separate clothing that's important. It's also having the right equipment. That also has to be high prestige. It's important to have the correct brand names. Now, another way of indicating high status is to own many similar garments so that you rarely wear the same thing. This is what's known as conspicuous multiplication. For instance, some very wealthy men wear a brand new shirt every day. They'll never use the same shirt twice. Having a large, up-to-date wardrobe is especially important for men and women who want to establish themselves socially and professionally. Who want to make an impression. Once people know them, have made a decision about their status, it usually becomes less important. Teenagers, in particular, feel very strongly about showing variety in their dress. For example, teenage girls often feel so embarrassed about wearing the same outfit twice in the same week that even if they only own a few clothes, they'll try hard to make them seem new by combining them in different ways and with different accessories. They feel so strongly about this, in fact, that they'll often prefer quantity to quality. Now, let's move on to another form of conspicuous consumption, and I'm talking about the use of expensive materials, conspicuous materials. Now, in the past, materials such as satin and velvet were prestigious because they were hand-woven and required a lot of time and labor. But today, modern machinery's changed all that. The result is that natural materials, which are often more scarce, are now more prestigious. And I'm talking about materials like silk, leather, wool. In today's world, natural is best. Artificial materials such as nylon and polyester were expensive and very fashionable when they first appeared, but as they became cheaper to produce, polyester became a dirty word, and now it's seen as the poor man's silk. You can also see a similar pattern with animal skins and pelts. Today, because wildlife's becoming scarcer, these things have gotten more expensive and therefore more prestigious, particularly the hides of animals like the alligator. In centuries past, however, when things were different, skins and pelts of more common animals were associated with peasants, shepherds, and hunters, even outlaws. To show their status, merchants wore robes trimmed with less common fur, such as beaver. Noblemen preferred sable, and kings and queens wore ermine. All, again, relatively rare materials, and therefore indicators of status. As you know, though, even though skins of wild animals are often prestigious in the sense of being rare and therefore expensive, today they're also seen as showing a disregard for the environment and wildlife. Okay, now another way people display their wealth is by wearing jewelry. High-priced stones and metals, particularly those like gold and diamonds whose market price is generally known to be high. Gemstones such as rubies or emeralds, whose market price is less well known or which are more easily imitated, are less popular. Instant identification's desirable, you see. In other words, People need to be able to understand just by looking that something's expensive. And that's why platinum never really became very popular. Even though it's more expensive than gold, the problem was people couldn't easily tell it from silver or aluminum. Anyway, we call this display of expensive items conspicuous wealth. Next, we come to conspicuous labeling. Not long ago, you could recognize a high-quality, hand-tailored suit made in, say, London's Savile Row or Paris. Today, though, thanks to sophisticated manufacturing methods and artificial materials that look like the real thing, it's become very difficult to tell simply by looking whether a suit, a jacket, or whatever has been handmade using the finest natural materials and therefore whether it has cost far more than your average off-the-rack equivalent. In addition, more people than ever are wealthy. Together, these two things create a problem. It's almost impossible to distinguish the rich from the very rich simply by looking at what they're wearing. So how do the very rich show their status? Well, one way is by using labels to show expensive brands. Designers realized that high-status garments didn't need to be recognizably of better quality or more difficult to produce than other garments. They only needed to be recognizably more expensive. So they had to somehow include the price of each garment in the basic design. How did they do that? The answer is they moved the designer's name from the inside to the outside of the garment. Simple. Then they aggressively promoted these names and trademarks until they became household names. Now, the prices of these designer garments were not high because they were better quality, but because of the huge cost of advertising them. And people wearing these clothes would be sending out the message, I can afford to buy clothes made by this designer. In fact, people will happily buy inferior quality clothes if they're clearly labeled and everyone knows they are highly priced. And cotton t-shirts are a great example of this. They may fade quickly and shrink out of shape after just a few washings, but it doesn't matter. If they have the right designer name printed on them, people prefer them to better-made t-shirts. Apparently, they make the people who wear them feel secure. At least, that's what research indicates. Conspicuous labeling, then, was a radical but very effective solution to a rather difficult problem. Do you see how this works? Now, to wrap up, I'd like to mention two other kinds of conspicuous consumption in clothing to bring our total to 8 different types. One of these is conspicuous outrage. In other words, dressing which leads people to feel outrage, shock, if you like. Here, people purposely wear clothes that aren't in good taste, that others won't approve of, that don't conform. These clothes attract negative attention, but they get attention nonetheless. Now, the teenage punks of the 1980s were a good example of this, as are pop stars who turn up at formal events in torn or faded T-shirts with offensive language printed on them. Now, this brings me to the last type, what I call associative consumption, in which people wear items of clothing because they've acquired prestige through association with high-status individuals, such as royalty, like Princess Diana, or film stars. A good example of this is John Lennon's round glasses. These became a fashion icon, and even today people refer to round glasses as John Lennon glasses. Associative consumption also includes high-status activities. Just think of the clothing associated with horseback riding. Checked suits, glossy high-heeled boots, polo shirts, and waisted jackets. These items have the power of association. We may assume that the people wearing them ride and own horses and therefore have the money associated with these activities. The same's true of fashion goods associated with golfing and yachting. They all send out strong signals. Okay, so let's quickly review. We've said that conspicuous consumption's a way of signaling how wealthy we are, what status we have, and clothing's one way we do this. It's one way we consume conspicuously. I've mentioned conspicuous addition, meaning people wear more clothes to show their status. And then we looked at conspicuous division, where people wear different outfits at different times of the day or for different activities. And then there was conspicuous multiplication, where people have many garments of the same type. And then we considered conspicuous materials, in which people wear rare or expensive materials to show wealth, followed by conspicuous wealth, where people wear high-priced materials such as gold and diamonds, usually as accessories. And after that, we looked at conspicuous labeling, where garments are worn with their designer labels on the outside for everyone to see. Not too subtle, but it works. It says something. And finally, we looked at conspicuous outrage, where clothing is used to attract negative attention, where the intent is to shock people. And associative consumption, where clothing is associated with a celebrity or lifestyle. So you see, fashion really is a vehicle for self-expression, for saying, this is me and this is the kind of lifestyle I have. Can you match it? All right, everyone. Let's take a break there, and we'll start our seminar in 15 minutes, okay?
Page 65. Listening for details. A. Close your book. Listen to the lecture again. Add supporting details to your notes and correct any mistakes. Unit 9. Quiz. A. Listen to each question. Circle the letter of the correct answer. 1.
Where did the sumptuary laws originate?
Two.
What clothing features indicated social status in ancient Rome?
Three.
What is an example of conspicuous wealth?
Four.
What is an example of conspicuous multiplication?
Five.
Why is polyester no longer fashionable?
Six.
Why are designer clothes so expensive?
Unit 10. The Making of Genius. Page 73. Listening for main ideas. A. Close your book. Listen to the lecture and take notes.
Hello, everyone. Today we'll begin our next unit, and the topic is one that I think you'll find interesting. One of the most noteworthy aspects of human beings is our remarkable ability to learn a wide variety of skills, and to learn some skills very well. I'm sure you'll agree that great athletes, musicians, and singers are often the objects of our respect and admiration. And one reason for this is that many of us believe these individuals are special, That is, we believe that they have special talents provided by their DNA. They are gifted. But do you think it is really true? Could you or I become another Mozart, another Einstein, or another Van Gogh? Today, we'll look at this question by discussing expert performance. That is, performances that are at a world-class level. First, I'd like to focus on the importance of practice and some reasons why many scientists doubt that innate talent is particularly important in skill development. Second, we'll look at the contribution which innate talent might make. And finally, I'll try to tie these two ideas together by proposing that it's the interaction of practice and talent that produces great musicians, scientists, and so on. Okay, so let's begin with the notion of practice. First of all, let's consider the fact that there have been historical increases in performance in many areas, particularly in the past 100 to 200 years. For instance, Olympic records in many sports have been broken repeatedly, even in sports that have had few changes in equipment, such as running sports. How can we account for this? Well, if innate talent were a strongly limiting factor, we wouldn't expect such rapid improvements in world record performances, unless you happen to believe that innate talent has increased in the past century. Of course, no one believes this to be the case. Instead, we believe that external factors, such as better training methods and better diets, have had an enormous effect. Now, this phenomenon isn't just limited to athletics. We can find the same situation in the world of music. There are pieces of music that used to be thought of as being virtually unplayable. For instance, in the 19th century, some people thought that the violinist Niccolò Paganini had magical powers because of the difficult techniques he had mastered. However, today many of his pieces are regularly played by adult and even by outstanding child musicians. So once again, the general conclusion is that innate talent hasn't limited human performance to this point in history. If that's right, then it's reasonable to expect that better practice and training will allow skill levels to continue to rise. Yes? Do you have a question?
I have a comment. I mean, what you're saying makes sense to me because every year new world records are broken. I don't think we really know what our limitations are.
I agree. We're getting closer to human limitations every time a new world record is set. But you're right, we're not there yet. Now, another reason to believe that practice is extremely important is because general intelligence and memory abilities and specific abilities are not strongly related. I see a question.
Sorry to interrupt again, but I'm not sure what you mean by not strongly related.
Okay, here's an example. World chess masters are intelligent, but they're not any more intelligent than many people who can't play chess at all. When world-class chess players have been tested for general memory skills, their memories are no better than many non-experts. But when they're tested for their memory of board positions in chess, they have an extremely well-developed memory of chessboard positions that they've seen in the past. This allows them to make decisions more rapidly and accurately than ordinary people.
Okay, so experts have a kind of specialized type of knowledge or a specialized memory.
Well, specialized knowledge. In the case of chess, a major part of that specialized knowledge is their specialized memory for chessboard positions. Okay? And it all comes from enormous amounts of practice and experience in their area. Now, a third point is that success is based on a variety of motivational, personality, and social factors. Important personality factors are, perseverance, or you might say patience in the face of failure, the ability to concentrate for long periods of time, self-confidence, optimism, competitiveness, a high energy level, and the ability to control anxiety. Now, related to this is the idea of social support. Remember that I just mentioned the ability to concentrate for long periods of time. Well, research has shown that very few people have the ability to practice intensely for long periods of time when they have no social support. An example might help here. We know that sustained support from an adult is needed for young musicians to become successful. Because without a lot of support and encouragement, young people won't do the long hours of practice necessary to excel. In other words, parental support seems to come first, and this is followed by intense practice, which then sometimes results in great skill development. Now, I've mentioned that in order to become an exceptional performer in a complex skill like playing the violin, a person has to work hard for a long period of time. Now, what do you think I might mean by that? Is a long period of time 1 year, 3 years, 5 years? What do you think? Yes, Greg.
Well, I would say a lot longer than 5 years. I've read about the lives of several famous musicians and athletes and writers, and I don't know, they have to practice maybe 8 or 10 years or so.
10 years is the answer. The truth is that even the most talented people need to begin to study or practice before the age of 6, and then put in more than 10 years of intensive, high-quality practice. Let's look at the classic example of a genius, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. Behind the original creative music that he wrote was years of hard work. Mozart practiced intensely. He wrote his first 7 works for the piano and orchestra when he was between the ages of 11 and 16. Now that's impressive. But they were actually arrangements of works by other composers, so his early works were a kind of practice, not creative or original. Mozart didn't produce an original masterpiece for piano and orchestra until he was 21. But think about that. By the time he was 21, he had been playing music for 16 years and had been writing music for piano and orchestra for 10 years. So even in Mozart's case, a long period of practice preceded his works of creative genius. All right. So far I've suggested that 3 things are necessary to become great: practice, strong personal characteristics such as self-confidence, and strong social support. But let's consider another factor: innate talent. This is the idea that our genetic qualities are important, that we inherit talent from our parents. Right away, I'd like to point out that the effects of innate talent are extremely difficult to measure and separate from environmental factors. Even in cases in which young children are very skilled, it's not clear that innate talent is the main cause, because researchers have almost always discovered that the child's parents had created a powerful, supportive environment for the child from infancy. So social support and encouragement probably played important roles. Now, something that may surprise you is that most people who become highly skilled as adults don't show signs of greatness when they're young children. In one study, a researcher looked at 21 Americans who were beginning careers as concert pianists. Generally, the signs of special skill followed a combination of good opportunities and strong encouragement from parents and teachers. Signs of greatness couldn't be seen until they had practiced intensely for at least 6 years. The same results were found for professional tennis players in Germany, and that's a country that has produced top players, such as Steffi Graf. Signs of innate talent usually only come out after long-term parental encouragement and a considerable amount of training. Notwithstanding the difficulties involved with trying to detect innate talent, many child psychologists believe that some children are born with talent that allows them to learn specific skills very rapidly. An example of a skill that can clearly be inherited is working memory capacity. That is, a person's ability to process and hold information in the memory when solving problems. This type of ability seems to be important in young people who are especially good at mathematics. In addition, some degree of general intelligence, such as the capacity to analyze problems, is clearly inherited. So some aspects of intelligence do seem to be innate. Now, another way in which innate talents may play a role is related to what I said earlier about personality factors, such as self-confidence, persistence, and competitiveness. Many researchers believe that these qualities are at least partially innate. For instance, some children seem to have a natural ability to concentrate intensely for long periods. Others seem to be naturally daring and confident. Some seem to be born with the physical, mental, and emotional energy necessary to achieve greatness. That may be a fundamental part of innate talent. A further point is that most researchers have partly defined innate ability as the ability for someone to perform a skill well before getting the opportunity for much practice. For example, now if you find that a child is good at playing the piano right away without any practice, you might assume that the child has innate skills. However, this may not be the case. What we should perhaps be looking at in young people is not great ability when they begin their training, but rather ease of learning. Ease of learning may be the most important sign that a child is gifted. I'm sure you noticed in school that some children seem to learn to play a sport, play a musical instrument, or do mathematics more easily than others. It seems reasonable that this is a sign of innate talent. Okay, to summarize, what does all this mean? Well, it looks like becoming great at something involves a fairly predictable process. First, the person is born with certain personality characteristics. These characteristics are then probably nurtured by the child's parents. Next, when the child begins to show interest in some area, the parents react supportively. That is, they encourage and perhaps even push the child to work hard and to practice intensively. Then the child goes on to achieve increasingly higher levels of skill. As the child becomes more skilled, he or she becomes more motivated to excel, and parents and teachers provide support. This can result in a long-term commitment to practice. Finally, if the child continues to work hard for around 10 years, he or she will probably become very highly skilled in the area chosen. Now, I'd like to remind you that scientific research rarely allows us to understand how to separate genetic and external factors in human learning. What I'd like to suggest, though, is that these two accounts of skill development are not incompatible. To quote a line on page 343 of your textbook, it's quite likely that the interaction of innate capacities and opportunities for engaging in intense training result in high levels of performance. I think those words sum up the situation quite accurately. In closing, I'd like to ask you a final question. Were the works of Mozart brought into this world only through practice and study? Can anyone make the scientific breakthroughs of Einstein or play basketball like Michael Jordan if they work hard enough? In my opinion, they cannot. Innate talent is also needed, but we just haven't learned how to measure it yet. All right, now I'd like you to get into groups. Look at page 349, and there you'll see...
Page 74. Listening for details. A. Close your book. Listen to the lecture again. Add supporting details to your notes and correct any mistakes. Unit 10. Quiz. A. Listen to each question. Circle the letter of the correct answer. 1.
What innate ability may contribute to skill development?
Two.
What do the continued improvements in Olympic records show?
3.
What types of memory are well developed in world chess masters?
Four.
What happens to young children when parents don't support their interests?
Five.
How much practice is needed to become an exceptional performer?
Six.
Why is it hard to measure innate talent?
Unit 11. The New Global Superculture. Page 82. Listening for main ideas. A. Close your book. Listen to the lecture and take notes.
Morning. I'd like to begin today's class with a question. And the question's this. We are now in an age where powerful social, political, and technological forces are changing our world and rapidly creating a homogeneous global society where people think and behave in similar ways. Do you think it's possible, in this kind of global society, for individual cultures to survive? Or will their unique traditions gradually disappear? And if these unique traditions were to disappear, would it really matter? Would it, as many believe, really be a tragedy if we were to lose those things that make societies, communities, different? The fact is, the world is losing cultures quicker than you might think. Language is the best measure of cultural diversity, and it's estimated that one language is dying every 2 weeks, and with it, unique ways of life. Ways of thinking, communicating, and living. So, that's today's theme, the issue, if you will, that's at the heart of everything I'm going to say. First, I'll try to describe the forces that are pushing us, driving us toward a homogeneous global society, a world superculture. Then, we'll go on to consider the disadvantages of a homogeneous society, and I'll offer some thoughts as to why we should think very seriously about preserving individual cultures and their traditions. So, why is a global superculture emerging? What factors can we say have contributed? Well, to start with, there's flight. You often hear people say the world has become smaller, and without doubt, flight, particularly affordable air travel, has had the greatest influence here. This means the airplane caused not just a technological, but also a social revolution. Suddenly, large numbers of ordinary people were able to interact with people from other cultures thousands of miles away and see with their own eyes the differences and the similarities between them, the things that make people human regardless of culture. Now, think about it. Many of us in this room have, I'm sure, traveled to parts of the world our parents or grandparents never dreamed of visiting. And, as a consequence of air travel, commercial links, overseas businesses, and so on have become far easier to establish. So now, goods, technologies, and fads are entering new markets faster than ever before. Can anybody think of a good example of something, say a technology or fad, that's spread quickly?
How about cell phones? Everybody's got them now.
Great example, Adam. Okay, let's take the cell phone, for instance. You could go to any country in the world today, developed or otherwise, and I'd bet you could find a cell phone. You might have to search a bit, but I'm sure you could find one. Yet, these haven't been around very long, relatively speaking, right? Same with computers. That's to say, because people from diverse cultures are able to interact today in a way they never could before, commodities, ideas, and attitudes all get disseminated with unprecedented speed. The latest fads, whether we're talking about electronic technology, clothing, perfume, fast foods, whatever, they now frequently become not just national, but international, global phenomena. That's one influence, air travel. Now, another, and maybe equally important influence, has been the communications industries, which, and I'm going to include the internet in that category, along with the media, TV, radio, newspapers, magazines, and film. We can't really discuss the subject of a global culture without considering the powerful influence of these things. Today, as we all know, film and television are multi-million, even billion-dollar industries. Films, documentaries, news and current affairs programs, quiz shows, even soap operas are usually made in the hope that they'll be bought and shown around the world. As a case in point, take shows such as Friends or ER. They're watched on every continent and have universal appeal, as they're based on universal human problems, on personal relationships and emotions. But these programs also present and promote ideas and attitudes. They enable viewers to see with their own eyes other ways of life. And of course, an important element in all this is advertising. Let's not forget that the media receives most of its money from advertising, which means that advertising's a major feature of television, magazines, etc. Advertising works through the media, so we're constantly exposed to it and influenced by it. That's to say, the global spread of fads I mentioned earlier owes a lot to the power of advertising. So, just as, say, in the U.S., commercials proclaim that it's cool to wear Reebok trainers, that Kellogg's cereals are the healthiest way to start the day, that Colgate toothpaste gives your teeth the best protection, and so on, well, they're probably getting the same message in scores of other countries, with the result that, globally speaking, people's habits are changing. They're converging. What's an example of converging habits? Here's one. Many Japanese today eat cereal for breakfast rather than traditional rice and soup, or maybe have a hamburger at McDonald's for lunch. And likewise, Americans or Canadians might choose sushi, tacos, or Chinese food. In fact, today, most people, at least in large cities, expect to get almost any kind of ethnic food. The fact is that the media spreads ideas incredibly widely, quickly, and effectively, whether it's cell phones, eating habits, fashion, whatever. And that's what makes it such a powerful marketing tool. To understand just how powerful, think for a minute about the music industry. Consider how television, radio, newspapers, magazines, and the internet have been used to promote music and pop stars internationally. Stars like Elvis, the Beatles, Madonna, Michael Jackson, Britney Spears, the Spice Girls. These and other stars have acquired world fame thanks mainly to the media. And the same is true of sports teams and stars. These celebrities are internationally famous, and people in different corners of the world want to imitate them, have similar lifestyles. Indeed, that's why companies use celebrities to advertise their products. The idea is that if Ronaldo uses, say, Nike soccer shoes, then you'll want to do likewise, whether you're American, Argentinian, Korean, whatever. That's the message. And the result? Youth around the world end up using the same brands. Okay, the media then clearly plays a major role in spreading trends across the globe and highlighting our similarities. But there are other forces at work too. And world politics is surely one of these. Although political divisions and ideologies continue to separate nations, it is, I think, true to say, generally speaking, that prejudice is diminishing and people are increasingly open to other cultures and ideas. To some extent, this is no doubt the result of political and therefore social convergences. of unions, such as the European Union, which represents a group of countries with quite different traditions in many cases, but where, nevertheless, there exists a spirit of unity, or at least cooperation. Europeans are beginning to feel that they're members of a larger culture that's more than simply a political convenience. Heads of government increasingly appear to be consulting and acting together on issues that affect the world at large, such as the environment and third world poverty. Because these things are reported in the media on news shows like CNN and are seen by millions, they create a sense of pulling in the same direction, a feeling that there's a culture of humanity, if you like. There's another way in which politics can affect the spread of ideas across the globe, and that is through controlling the movement of people across national borders. Immigration and emigration. Political circumstances, as well as more accessible international transportation, have brought an increase in the number who choose to emigrate to another country. And when people move, so do their ideas and beliefs. Immigrants introduce things from their own cultures into their new communities, from sports to food, house decor, games, you name it. Again, in many countries, from Australia to England, we're seeing cultures mixing together as never before. This increase in cross-cultural contact, along with the decrease in prejudice I mentioned earlier, has led to many interracial marriages, which in turn have produced children who are familiar with more than one culture. This again reinforces similarity, the idea that we're all members of one human race despite surface differences. As a result, I think we have a new global superculture that's both richer and more diverse than any one single culture. Now, communications lie at the heart of most of the things I've been talking about. Even though air travel and the media have allowed us glimpses of each other's cultures, people could not convey their ideas, beliefs, and attitudes if they couldn't communicate them. So what I'm trying to say is that I'd like to acknowledge the role English has played as the world's unofficial international language. If you want an example, just look at the internet. In 1990, there were just a few hundred internet sites. Today, there are tens of millions, and the vast majority of these are in English. All right, although I've only touched on a few very broad ideas, I'd like now to finish talking about the forces that are shaping a global superculture and end by briefly sharing a few thoughts on where this trend's going. I should first say that I think a global superculture is inevitable, and in my opinion, in many ways, that's a good thing, perhaps even an ideal. It emphasizes the oneness of mankind, promotes unity, and, I would argue, helps prepare the way for a fairer world where the Earth's resources benefit everyone and wealth is evenly distributed. However, that is not to say that these things must be at the expense of cultural traditions, cultural diversity. Today, for example, we see the Ainu of Japan, the Chipaya of Bolivia, and the Penan of Malaysia on the list of endangered societies. If these and other cultures were to disappear, we'd lose the wonderful variety and richness of human life, whether we're talking about philosophies, clothes, or food. To some extent, we'd lose part of what has made us what we are today, lose touch with our roots, perhaps even the variety and individuality that makes us unique as a species. What's more, there'd be practical, possibly very significant practical implications. For instance, we may lose the benefits of alternative approaches to medicine, social systems, farming techniques, not to mention spiritual insight and the like. People in the developed world not only have a lot to give, but also a lot to learn from other societies about these and other things. We're already learning that technology doesn't necessarily bring advancement. It can also bring destruction, materialism, and a decrease in morality and social cohesion. And what about the purely aesthetic representations of human civilizations? What of art forms? Do we really want to lose the rich variety of art traditions? The many different cultural expressions of human existence? Perspectives on problem solving, too, dealing with environmental issues, say, creating a balance with nature, may be lost to us. Wouldn't these losses be tragic? I, for one, believe that future generations need to incorporate insights from a multitude of cultures. This would perhaps go some way toward preserving those cultures and traditions, which very simply make human society richer and more colorful. Okay, well, I could say a lot more, but as always, time doesn't permit. So, to summarize then, we've looked at some of the main factors that are contributing to an emerging global culture. They include, at least, cheap available air travel, the enormous power and influence of the media, changes in the political scenery exemplified by the European Union, perhaps, and the role of English as an international language. I started by asking whether these developments will mean that individual cultural traditions will inevitably disappear. The answer, I think, is that sadly, many already have, but it's possible for others to survive. For this to happen, we need to think more carefully about the potential dangers of globalization, as well as its benefits. And we need to appreciate the value of these traditions, for only then will we think twice about carelessly losing them. Let's just hope enough of us realize that before it's too late. Okay, in preparation for your essay, I'd like you to think about ways in which we can ensure the survival of cultural traditions in a world where a superculture is rapidly emerging. Are there any questions?
Page 83. Listening for details. A. Close your book. Listen to the lecture again. Add supporting details to your notes and correct any mistakes. Unit 11. Quiz. A. Listen to each question. Circle the letter of the correct answer. 1.
According to the speaker, what has most influenced the globalization of ideas?
Two.
According to the speaker, what has most influenced the globalization of fads?
Three.
Why do many movies and TV shows have universal appeal?
Four.
According to the speaker, what is the best way of measuring cultural diversity?
Five.
According to the speaker, how do immigrants contribute to their new cultures?
Six.
According to the speaker, what are two negative effects of technology?
Unit 12. Computer Security. Page 92. Listening for main ideas. A. Close your book. Listen to the lecture and take notes.
All right, why don't we get started here? I'm quite sure that everyone in the class uses a computer regularly. For instance, who uses email every day? Right, just about everyone. How many of you use the internet, say, at least 5 times a week? The same, just about everyone in the room. I think we would all agree that our lives have been changed and in many ways improved by the computer and the internet. However, there are real dangers here. The fact is, computers and computer networks have created opportunities for crime that never existed before. As a result, the police and justice departments are becoming increasingly concerned about the growing number of computer users who are accessing private or secret information. Now, this problem is on the increase worldwide. Statistics are showing a trend toward more computer crime every year. In fact, recent studies have shown that around 70% of all companies that are online have experienced some type of attack. We can say that there are 3 reasons for these dangers. Now, first, personal computers hold huge amounts of information, and some of it's quite sensitive. Companies have sensitive business information, new products, and financial records to protect. Governments have defense secrets, federal banks, and records for millions of citizens. We've found that the theft of information is usually financially motivated. Some companies try to get information from their competitors by accessing information from computers. Computer criminals also access and steal information in order to sell it to other people or competing companies. Again, their purpose is usually financial gain. Okay, in the first case, the criminal steals information and then possibly sells it. The second reason for computer crime is to steal money directly. Banking, insurance, and business organizations use computers for most of their transactions, making them the hardest hit by computer criminals. Now think about this for a moment. The American banking system alone transfers over $400 billion every day. With this amount being transferred daily, it's no wonder that experts fear that a major financial disaster could occur. Now, you may be interested to know that between $1 and $3 billion are lost each year in the U.S. through computer crime. And 40% of large American companies suffered at least one major instance of computer fraud in the last 10 years. Can you imagine? 40%. We can see from these figures how serious a problem this is. I call the people who commit these crimes computer criminals rather than hackers, because hackers may not be motivated by financial gain. Now, this is how a typical scenario might go. A computer criminal, let's call the criminal a he, figures out how to get into a bank network. He changes account names and numbers and puts money into a bank account that he has already opened. He then withdraws the money from the account, which is, of course, not in his real name. His crime has just made him rich. In case you were wondering, this has actually happened many times in the past. In companies, goods can be stolen and inventory, that is the list of goods, and sales figures can be changed to cover up the problem. Mailing addresses can also be temporarily changed so that expensive or valuable items are sent to the criminal's address. The accounts can then be changed back to the original addresses. Sometimes they don't detect this type of robbery for months or years, so it's impossible to find the criminal because the records have been changed back. Now remember, these things are not just stories. They have really happened. All right, let's consider the third reason for computer crime, which involves hacking, that is, breaking into someone else's private computer network, often that of a company or agency. Now, hacking can take place for various reasons, but it tends to be done by individuals, not organized groups. And those individuals are typically young men in their teens or 20s. Some apparently do it for the challenge, while others feel angry at society or feel powerless in their everyday lives. Hacking provides such people with something they can't get elsewhere: an exciting and complex challenge, an opportunity to show how much they know, and a sense of importance. Now that we've considered some of the causes of hacking and computer crime, let's consider the effects. Well, the events that have occurred in the past 20 years are astonishing. On more than one occasion, computers all over the world have been shut down as a computer virus has raced around the planet. In less than 24 hours, billions of dollars in work hours have been lost. Computers in major companies and even major software companies have been shut down completely. In one case, approximately 70% of the computers in several European countries were shut down. Even government computers were affected. How can this happen? Easy. The transmission of a simple virus program. Even beginning students of computer science can make powerful viruses that can do everything I've just mentioned. They can write a virus program and send it via the internet to hundreds of computer users. The virus enters the user's computer's operating system, replaces good files with a copy of itself, and then sends itself to other computers via the computer user's email address book. Soon, millions of computers can be infected. Now, there's a whole other side to this problem that is more closely related to your life. Imagine that a computer criminal is able to get, let's say, your credit card number. In the best case scenario, this will cause you a great deal of inconvenience. And in the worst case scenario, it will cause you financial loss. Another possibility is that someone may get your Social Security number, then they can impersonate you. This can lead to serious problems and huge costs in terms of time spent solving the problem and the stress involved. The more powerful a technology is, the more potential there is for problems. Well, I've tried to give you some background about the seriousness of the problem, but now I'd like to briefly talk about the battle between hackers and computer criminals on the one side, and the people and companies interested in preventing these problems on the other. What's being done to stop computer crime? First, the courts are getting much tougher with hackers, the people who illegally enter a computer network, even if they claim not to be stealing anything. The courts are also now punishing computer criminals more severely in order to give potential criminals a strong message that computer crime is serious, and if you're caught doing it, you'll be punished. Some of these criminals have gone to federal prison for several years and been fined large sums of money. This is seen as a way to discourage people from experimenting with this new type of crime. Now, within a company or other organization, firewalls are the first line of defense, the first way to deter computer crime. A firewall is a software program that acts as a gatekeeper between the Internet and a company's intranet. That's INTRANET, the network of computers used by the company's employees. Now, one type of firewall examines the source address and destination address of all of the data going in or out of the network. It can stop some data from entering the network and other data from leaving. However, firewalls can't protect networks from all attacks. In the past, hackers have often gotten around a firewall by accessing the network from a modem that an employee has brought in on his or her own without talking to the system administrator. Now, such employees are also trying to find an easy route around the firewall, usually because they want to access data on their work computer from home. These paths must also be closed. So if you have a colleague who is doing this sort of thing, you should definitely talk to them because they're opening a door for potential hacking. And another way to increase security is through the use of less obvious and less easily remembered passwords. For instance, employees are often advised to never use a person's name, such as Nancy. Here's why. Many hackers use programs that are called password guessers. These programs check every word in a large dictionary all of the names in an encyclopedia, and then they use each entry in a local telephone book. As you can guess, if you have used almost any word in your local language, the hacker will eventually find out what it is and then be able to get into your system. Now, the most difficult passwords to guess are a combination of small and capital letters, numbers and punctuation marks, such as capital Y, 0, 3, exclamation point, small m. Try finding that with a password guesser. In addition, passwords should be told to the minimum number of people. Okay, a fourth method concerns access control software, something which has become quite common. Now, this software limits the user's access to information as well as the operations he can perform. So, for example, access control software might only let people read certain files or programs, but not input data, and it may keep them out of other files entirely. Many universities use this type of software. Computer system administrators at the school can access the entire system. Teachers can access a great deal of it, but not as much as the system administrators. And finally, students can access fewer areas than the teachers. It works on a need-to-know or need-to-use basis. Encryption software has also been developed to scramble data so that hackers can't understand it even if they do steal it. The data can be read and used only if the user knows the key. Now this is a very effective way of protecting information. Encryption has developed rapidly since the 1980s, so now all of us can have access to fast, affordable, and powerful encryption systems. These systems are already resistant to the average hacker, and in a few years, only government or military supercomputers will be able to break most codes. And finally, audit trails, that's AUDIT trails, are also available. Audit trails monitor the use of a computer and alert owners to any attempts to enter their computer system. It's usually possible to identify any user who gains access to the system and when the access occurred, making it possible to trace the hacker. Although this isn't simple to do, it can be done, particularly if the hacker persists and returns for repeated attacks on the system. One way that some hackers have been caught has been when the system administrator has what is called a jail-ready. Valuable-looking but false information is put in the jail. This might be something like credit card numbers or other sensitive financial data. When the hacker tries to get the false data, the administrator uses software to determine where the hacker is. The software follows the line of data back to the hacker's computer. Well, those are some of the major things that are happening at present to decrease computer crime. None of them are completely satisfactory, but together they're certainly helping to maintain the integrity of personal and corporate computer systems and communications. And these changes, as well as the improvements that are certain to come, should influence people to stop hacking by making it less profitable and more risky. And this will help ensure confidentiality when communicating via computer. Well, let's stop here for today and get started with your presentations. Our first speakers, Carlos and Yumi, are scheduled to talk about encryption systems.
Page 92. Listening for details. A. Close your book. Listen to the lecture again. Add supporting details to your notes and correct any mistakes. Unit 12. Quiz. A. Listen to each question. Circle the letter of the correct answer. 1.
What percentage of companies have experienced computer fraud?
Two.
Who is the typical hacker?
3.
How do hackers shut down computer systems?
4.
What do hackers typically steal from individual computer users?
5.
What can be used to trace hackers?
6.
What stops information from entering a company's intranet?
'This is the end of the program.